Hello everyone and welcome to MMA Start to Finish. I'm Julian and this is Matt.
Hi.
And today we're going to be talking about UFC 13 Ultimate Force, held in Augusta, Georgia at the
Civic Center.
Civic Center in Augusta, Georgia.
Again,
we're back in the, I don't know if I want to use the word great state, the phrase rather, great state in reference to Georgia and the current climate, but
yeah. The progressive state of
Georgia.
Georgia.
The progressive city of Augusta, Georgia. That's right. Conspicuous by its absence on the Wikipedia page for UFC 13 is the buy rate. Up until this point, we've been able to track the buy rate, and it has gone down before it shot back up for UFC 12, actually. But we're here at UFC 13, and there's no buy rate.
Nothing at all.
We speculated that perhaps with the mounting legal pressure and their banning from many different providers that they just didn't publicly disclose the buy rate because it was kind of sad.
Well, I feel like maybe it was just more local, so it's probably just a much lower number.
Also, a lot of these old UFCs made a lot of money, and I'm not joking, at Blockbuster. People would show up to Blockbuster and they'd see these, I remember I used to go to, back in the day when those were still a corporation that existed.
Yeah.
I used to go into Blockbusters and I'd wander off into, the sports section, and there was all these, VHS and DVDs of old UFC events. So, a lot of people, I think Rogan on his podcast has talked about how he saw, a DVD or VHS of one of the first UFCs, and that's how he found out about it. But, anyway, I digress. So, not a lot of change from UFC 12. Joe Rogan is still here. The one big change as far as the staff, I guess, goes is Bruce is back. Bruce Buffer is once again our announcer. And we, again, have a main event and two tournaments. No title on the line in this main event, but we have two tournaments again, lightweight and heavyweight.
I'm glad they're keeping the divisions, even though the fans may not want that. It's better for the sport.
Yeah, they've mentioned this before, but you're just going to get more people who are able to do this if you open up.
Yeah, because otherwise you're just stuck with the heavyweight division and the small people who get beaten down.
The largest, angriest boys just consuming the small fighters.
Like Tank.
So, we said there was two tournaments, lightweight and heavyweight. This is the draw for the lightweight tournament. Christoph Leninger, Guy Mezger, and Inson Inoue versus Royce Alger. And the heavyweight tournament, we have a big name debuting. We see our first sighting of Randy Couture. He was taking on Tony Hamill, who we'll get to, or Halme?
I think it's Hamill.
The L and the M are not.
Yeah.
Ludwig Borga for the WWF fans out there. And we have Dmitry Stepanov and Stephen Graham, both who have no Wikipedia pages.
At all.
Squaring off as well.
Very hard to Google, too.
And in the main event, we have Tank Abbott back, taking on Vitor the Phenom Belfort at 20 years of...
Not Victor Belfort?
Yeah, not Victor Belfort, as his own boxing coach called him, which struck me as very strange.
Yeah.
So the first fight we had tonight was the first fight in the lightweight tournament, and it was Christoph Leninger back from UFC 3. Had taken a little bit of a hiatus for several years, but has returned in his blue gi to take on Guy Mezger, the Lions Den product, who had fought in the UFC before, but only on the alternate card.
Yeah. So, Chris comes out in a gi, and in their interviews, Chris didn't say a whole lot.
No,
I feel like.
Very quiet man.
Guy was a bit of a mumble fest. We couldn't really tell what he was saying, for the most part. But he's a striker.
He basically has the same style as Ken. He just decided he should wear gloves.
Yeah.
And focus a little more on the striking than the grappling. Also, I did note that his bone structure is just Diet Ken Shamrock.
Same face, same haircut, almost the same way he talks.
It's a very distinctly, and I know I've said this for ad nauseum at this point, but it's a very 90s look, as many things are on these cards.
But he just looks like Ken.
Yeah, and Ken's look is a very 90s look as well. So Christoph, may not have wanted to wear his gi into the octagon, because Guy basically just used it like a hockey jersey and used it to hold him in place and beat the shit out of him.
It was very disheveled by the end of the fight.
I think that if modern rules were in place, well, I guess he wouldn't have a gi if modern rules were in place. What I was getting at, though, was if he wasn't allowed to grab onto Guy's trunks, he would have been sent to the moon, probably, very early.
And he held onto those trunks the entire fight.
The entire fight. While they were standing. Once they were on the ground, he acquiesced and let go, but while they were on the feet, got a firm grip of that waistband.
Oh, yeah. And we got some peeks at the family jewels. At least we think so.
Yeah.
We're not entirely sure because it's kind of grainy.
Yeah.
Moving around.
I'm not exactly upset that we're not sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if I need HD photos of Guy Mesger's cock.
We do not need the confirmation.
Yeah.
Please do not send the confirmation.
Yeah, please don't send us pictures of Guy Mesger's hog.
So Guy ends up letting Chris stand after they've been on the ground for a little bit. Then Chris gets into the mount, but gets thrown onto his back. So then they stay there for a while. Big John breaks them up again. They go back to the ground.
After Chris decides to hang onto that waistband for a little longer.
Yeah. It goes into overtime. But no matter how much he holds on to Guy's pants, he just can't make a win out of this situation.
Yeah, it was just bad news all around for Kristoff. And the one thing I will say positive about his slight change of strategy, I guess, heading into overtime was that he did start to actually throw some strikes in overtime, whereas in regulation he was kind of just a punching bag that grabbed you.
Yeah.
So a little bit of a change in tactics, but with, 12-minute fight, 3-minute overtime, unless you finish them in the overtime, you're not really going to sway the judges.
No.
So we went to the cards, and it was a unanimous victory for Guy.
Yep. Which he definitely earned.
Yeah, it wasn't a particularly close fight.
No.
Up next, in the other half of the lightweight tournament, we had Enson Inoue taking on Royce Alger. Royce had the UFC heavyweight champion Mark Coleman in his corner.
Mm-hmm.
Both very accomplished wrestlers, and decided it would behoove them to team up.
Yeah, Mark was making sure the crowd was cheering for him.
Being his hype man for the night.
Yeah. This fight was pretty quick. It was only 1 minute, 30 seconds. But it starts off very quick. Ensign almost immediately has Royce in a crucifix, but loses it to have Alger in a side guard. Ensign tries to go for an armbar. And he succeeds. I'm sorry.
He frames up for that armbar and makes the most of it.
It's not a whole lot of notes I got on this one. It went pretty quick.
Yeah, basically, Royce just sat in his guard and did not pay much heed to his own arms and just let that one slide out there. And he did fight it for a little bit. He did know to lock his hands to try and prevent it, but Ensign went belly down, and that was ball game.
Well, because Royce tried to pick him up and drop him, but
he did, yeah.
Ensign spun around and got that.
Tried to use power over technique, and when your arm is in a situation where it's about to get snapped in half, not exactly a great idea.
And this was moments before that drop happened. He gets picked up, and Ensign ends up on his stomach with that arm, and Big John rushes in to stop the fight.
Honestly, with the, I guess, kinetic energy involved with him bringing him down like that and him still holding on to that arm bar, genuinely surprised his arm didn't just get snapped with all that power coming down on it.
Yeah. I think he went down with it because he knew what was going to happen just as it was happening.
Yeah, he figured out what was happening. It was just a little late. It was also at this point in the night, after this fight, that we learned some interesting lore about our main event. Apparently, one of the guys in Vitor's corner was the dude that Tank got in a fight with in Puerto Rico. So, a lot of deep lore about this main event that they made a point to hype up throughout the night. There was at least 3 or 4 different cinematic packages, I guess.
Oh, yeah. They had Tank broadcasted between just about every fight.
You'd think that they were advertising for something you hadn't bought yet.
Yeah.
It was a little weird, but they're trying to add some gravitas to it. It's not a title fight, so it's not going to be as innately as important as their last main event. So they gotta put a little bit of spice on there.
In the Tank interview, just the short one of the Tank
I know what you're
interviews
talking about. Yeah, yeah.
they had between these fights. He goes on to say, "This will be the first fight I don't have to worry about getting arrested for."
Which also isn't true. That doesn't make any sense. Bro, you fought in the UFC like 5 other times. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Which, he's still never been the champ.
If anything, with the current, or the legal status at the time, he'd be more likely to go to jail now than he would have been 3 years before.
Yeah.
Because it's like actively banned in a lot of places at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Up next, we have the first fight in the heavyweight bracket. Stephen Graham, the big, meaty man who has some of the largest pecs I've seen on an adult.
He's sporting 4 shoulders.
Yeah, sporting several shoulders.
Uh-huh.
Taking on Dmitry Stepanov, who they mentioned was Russian, or I don't know if it was Serbian or Russian Special Forces, somewhere in the Baltics. So that's code for sure has killed people.
Oh, yeah.
Like, definitely has looked someone in the eye and pulled the trigger and not felt a damn thing.
I like how we assume these...
Yeah, we're just, like, making up all this fake lore for these guys.
I want one of them to, like, come across us and be like,
hey.
How'd they know?
Yeah.
Who told you?
Another semifinal that went by relatively quickly. The fight opened with Steven charging Dmitry, picking him up and throwing him down with a power slam, which, had he landed at a slightly different angle, probably would have knocked him the fuck out.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can tell us what happened next as I, for the YouTube audience, illustrate what would happen next.
Meaty key lock.
Yeah, he would hold down Dmitry and put his arm in a way it's not supposed to go.
Mm-mm. You can see his arm there. It's not natural.
And you can't quite see it in this shot, but seconds earlier, you could see Dmitry screaming in pain as he tapped out, which is a little disconcerting, honestly. Up next, we have the first UFC appearance of the natural, Randy Couture. He would be taking on quite the character, Tony... We can't figure out how to pronounce his last name. Halme? Hamel?
I think Halm.
Halm? Anyway, better known as Ludwig Borga, the WWF pro wrestler, and it definitely showed in his pre-fight interviews that he was a professional wrestler.
Oh, yeah. Because he threatened, I think it was first to just punch him in the face.
It started out very normal.
Punch him in the face. If that didn't work, headbutt him. If that doesn't work, rip his arms off.
Yeah, he said, I will rip his arms out of his socket, rip his legs out of their socket.
Yeah.
And then he said, as they showed a montage of him lifting, he has balls of iron. He proclaimed that to the world. However, in this fight, that forecast would not pan out. So another fight that ended in less than 2 minutes, Randy would very quickly snatch up Tony's back, and you could see from the entire grappling exchange that Randy was a wrestler and Tony was a pro wrestler. As soon as Randy shot in for the double leg to start the fight, you could see that he didn't have any kind of, like, even like a basic technical defense to get underhooks and like do anything to prevent a takedown.
He's used to the what's the word I'm looking for? Not reenactment. The
choreography?
Yeah, choreographed fights.
What he's used to is when you lift a dude up, he like actually,
helps you.
Yeah, helps you. He's not fighting against you.
Yeah. Even though Tony did have a 75-pound advantage, that is muscle.
He would still end up on his stomach underneath the mighty arms of Randy, as he would be the first ever opponent of a UFC Hall of Famer. So I guess that's notable.
Yeah.
I also believe, if I'm not mistaken, this was his only fight.
I think so.
He would go back to pro wrestling and think better of his mixed martial arts. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This was actually his last fight. He had 4 fights, all in rings, which is, I believe, Japanese promotion, and would then journey to the UFC and get strangled.
4 losses, 1 win.
Started out hot and never regained that form. It was at this point in the night that we also learned that Ensign, in a way, somehow, in that minute and 30 seconds, broke his hand during that armbar sequence. Now that I think about it, maybe that force got transferred onto his hand when he slammed him down. Maybe that's what broke his hand.
He seemed perfectly fine in the interview.
Yeah, you can't read too much into those post-fight interviews, though, because they're all jacked up on adrenaline. They're not going to feel anything anyway.
I feel like he would feel some of it, though.
You'd be surprised, dude. Like, a lot of those guys who get their, the shit kicked out of their legs and are all bruised up, they're able to, like, walk back to the locker room, but then for the next 2 weeks, like, when they wake up the next day, they're on crutches.
I have had a broken arm before, and I know it's kind of like a shock thing. It's different from this.
Yeah, because you weren't, like, in a combat situation.
Yeah, I was on the monkey bars.
Close, but not quite a combat situation.
Yeah, it was me versus the earth.
It was you versus gravity.
Yeah. I can sort of see where, why they don't feel it. It's different, but I don't know. There's some part of me that just makes me think, like...
You're just surprised he didn't notice his hand was broken.
Yeah, because, it looked like he had, from his stance, that he had his hands on his hips. Like, wouldn't that crunch a little bit and feel weird?
Well, here's the thing, too. Broken hand is a very vague diagnosis. There's a lot of degrees to that. He could have all the bones in his hand shattered, which is probably not what happened. What's more likely is he probably had, like, a slight hairline fracture in, like, one of his fingers or something.
Yeah.
And wasn't medically cleared. We haven't talked about this, but it just occurred to me. So you have to get medically cleared to fight. So after this, during the tournament format, after their initial fight, I guess they go backstage and the doctor's like, seemed fine to me, and you're allowed to go back to fight, and if they say no, that's how we get these alternates.
I guess so. I didn't really think too much on that.
Yeah, me either, until now.
Whether or not the guy thought they were okay or not,
Yeah. So Ensign with his broken hand would have to step aside, and we would see another future UFC legend debut tonight. We saw him in Tank's entourage previously. Tito Ortiz would make his UFC debut, and they actually showed us his alternate fight, like the whole thing, because I guess they had time.
Yeah.
A lot of these fights went by so quick.
They had plenty of time to show a fight like this. So, as they were showing the recording of this fight, they clearly weren't quite on their A game yet, because this wasn't like the official broadcast.
Well, yeah, they weren't planning to ever broadcast this, I don't think.
Yeah. So, we hear Jeff Blatnick talking to Bruce about not over talking Bruce Buffer as Bruce Buffer was announcing.
Yeah, so he was talking about not talking over him by talking over him.
Yeah.
Which was kind of funny.
And so we heard all that. It was... I don't really blame them, because it wasn't part of the broadcast until it was.
I wonder if Jeff, I wonder if they watched that back on their monitor, and he was like, Jesus fucking Christ, guys.
Yeah.
You want to edit this out? What the fuck? So the fight itself, not super memorable. Tito just tackled this much smaller man and then elbowed him a lot before he sent him home. I literally have no notes on this because he just ran through him so fast.
Most of those elbows are still legal today.
Yeah, which
is the weird thing.
They were at weird angles. It wasn't 9 or 12-6 rather, and they were in really borderline spots. Like you can't strike now to the back and the spine on purpose. If somebody's moving and you hit them, that's fine.
They look mostly to be to the shoulder.
Yeah, but he was getting borderline where he was the back shoulder. He was elbowing him in the shoulder and shit. Which I mean, you're not gonna knock him out like that, but that fucking sucks to put it in so many words.
Yeah.
Wes Anderson.
I want to say Wes Anderson every time because it's Wes What is it? Alberton. So it's another A. So Wes Anderson is what comes to mind. Tito's beating the shit out of Wes Anderson.
Tito's beating up. I fucking hate Scream, dude. What are you doing? Editor's note. Wes Craven did Scream, not Wes Anderson. I am very dumb.
Wes Alberton. When you think of someone who fixes your lawnmower.
Or your water cooler.
Something like that. The handy guy. The skinny handy guy. Wes also does not have a Wikipedia page.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have unfortunately a ton to add on this one because it was such a thorough mauling. I didn't even bother grabbing a screenshot from this one because it was an alternate fight. This is really just, you know, the amuse-bouche for Tito Ortiz, as we'd see him fill in the finale.
A note, though, they actually did have the towel thrown in for Wes.
That is true. We don't see a lot of towel thrown in anymore in modern times, or even really by UFC 13. That stopped happening as much, because that's how most of the fights used to end.
Yeah.
In, like the super early ones, because they didn't have a ref stoppage, so your corner had to save your fucking life.
Yeah.
Which is insane. But yeah, towel got thrown in, and Tito sent the mechanic home.
Mm-hmm.
So this fight is a prickly one to dissect for a couple different reasons. It started out as a pretty spirited exchange with Tito getting the better of Guy and obtaining control over him on the ground. And he would eventually maneuver to a position where he could rain down knees onto the head of Guy.
Mm-hmm. Multiple knees. The microphone picked them up very well.
Yeah, they were definitely audible knees. And
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the audiobook service.
Mm-mm. So, Guy was in a real bad situation. This easily could have ended the
Easily
fight
could have
right
ended the fight here, yeah.
Instead, we have a doctor who stopped. Not
a stoppage, but it was like literally a stoppage, but not in the traditional sense of the word.
Yeah.
Big John pulled Tito off to have the doctor come look at the cut on Guy, but once the doctor determined that the cut wasn't so bad they'd have to end the fight and that they were going to continue, he didn't put them back on the ground. If I'm not mistaken, you're allowed to as an official, I guess there'd be no precedent for it, but you're allowed to reset fighters on the ground. If you, for some reason, pull them apart in guard, you can put them back in guard, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So, Big John didn't do that. Big John sent them back to their feet, and from there, the fight changed dramatically. In this new context of the fight, Guy would get a front headlock on Tito, and then sink in a guillotine, and that was it.
Yeah.
That was the fight.
Tito couldn't really maneuver much from here. This also means Tank's camp has still not
yet to win
any sort of like belt or
hardware.
Metal. Yeah, they're still working on their software.
And Tito was pissed
Oh, yeah.
after the submission. And honestly, I would be pissed too. He was winning the fight. For all intents and purposes, if this fight was out on the streets, Guy would be in the hospital and Tito would be bragging.
Yeah.
But because Big John separated them for the cut, Tito kind of got the short end of the stick.
He really did. Guy is now the winner. Tito kind of gets his win stolen from him.
In a way. But we would certainly not see, as those of you who also are aware of the early 2000s of the UFC's history, this would certainly not be the last we would see of Tito Ortiz, or Guy Mezger for that matter. We'd see both of them again several times. Up next, we have the finale of the heavyweight tournament. Randy Couture taking on Stephen Graham. And I mentioned it earlier, Stephen Graham does not have a Wikipedia page. So based off of that information, and if you know who Randy Couture is, you can do the basic math and figure out who won this fight. The fight can basically be described as domination by Randy. Clearly the grappling advantage and the ability to dictate where the fight took place. He would run through the gauntlet of positions on Steven. At one point, he had him in side control. At one point, he was in north-south.
Yeah.
At one point, he could have gone into mount.
He was all over the place.
Did he ever get into, like, regular mount, not back mount?
I don't think so.
Either way, he didn't need to go into mount because he was just...
everywhere else.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is the heavyweight fight.
Yeah, they mentioned it on commentary that this was moving at a lightweight's pace. There was no heavy plotting and taking their time like we were accustomed to seeing it. Rather, for that point, today still largely accustomed to seeing for the heavyweights. From the north-south position, though, Randy would deliver some knees to the crown of the head of Steven. None that would, prompt Big John to step in and have a doctor look at the cut.
Because these are big boys.
Yeah, they can take it. He can take it. So, the knees to the brain would eventually allow Randy to take the back of Steven, and from there delivered what would now be just like really illegal shots to the back of the head. But in 1997. That was a great way to end a fight.
So, if this last fight was domination, this one was obliteration, because Tank cannot handle Vitor in any way.
It was funny because on commentary at UFC 12, Tank called the heavyweight finale that involved Vitor, and he kind of was, we'll say, damning with faint praise a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, I remember what it was specifically. He made fun of the way Vitor's corner celebrated winning the tournament. He was like, oh, you would have thought they won the Olympics or something. So he got his comeuppance for his shit talking in this main event.
At no point did Tank look to be the superior in this fight.
No, in all areas, Vitor was elite, and Tank was not as elite.
Yeah, he's
to put it kindly.
He's bar strong, but not strong here.
Not technically strong.
Yeah. So, and I know I made this point last time, comparing Ferozo and Tank and Vitor. If Tank can't beat Ferozo, and Ferozo can't beat Vitor, Tank has no chance in beating Vitor.
What you're talking about is what's known as MMA math. And MMA math is notoriously just wrong all the fucking time.
But it was right here.
But I do agree with you on this particular one. You could see that if Tank could not handle the sloppy strikes of Scott, there was no way he was going to be able to handle somebody as technically sound as Vitor.
I think what kept both of them up for as long as they were is Ferozo was even bigger than Tank, and so that was to his advantage. Tank isn't as big, so he just got even more dominated.
Yeah, Vitor was kind of able to just sweep out the legs from underneath Tank and would get him into a turtle position where he would then deliver. I couldn't tell if they were like really shots to the back of the head or the side of the head. Doesn't really matter. He just, finished off Tank rather quickly on the ground.
Tank never tapped, though. He did stay to that rule of his own.
He did not tap. He had to have Big John come in and save his life.
Yeah. That is not a winning position for Tank.
Yeah, this isn't moments before victory.
That's acceptance that I'm not winning this.
Up next, we have the showdown, UFC 14. So until then, thank you guys so much for joining us here today. And before we go, I do want to note that not the next show, obviously, as I just mentioned, it'll be UFC 14. But the one after that will be diving into the Pride waters for the first time.
This will be my first time seeing anything Pride. So
yeah.
It'll all be new to me.
So it's going to be kind of a shit show, but in the best way possible.
Good.
Anyway, until then, we'll actually be heading to UFC 14. So thank you guys for listening to the show. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.